What we have found essentially is that retirement plans don't fail because the investments fail or because of poor investing. They oftentimes are on a path to fail because the income is mismanaged. If you're working for a company or you're working for yourself or whatever the case may be, and you have a regular stream of income coming in while you're working, you get used to that paycheck coming in every week, every couple of weeks, every month, whatever the frequency is. Well, when you decide that it's time to make a change and move towards retirement, it doesn't mean that you don't still need a paycheck. It just changes where the paycheck comes from. All these years that you've been working and accumulating, what you've been doing is stockpiling funds to create a paycheck for retirement.
Hello and welcome back to Retire Stronger, episode 40. My name is John Foard, co-founder of Crown Advisors. I'm here today with my permanent co-host. He's been promoted finally. I believe we talked about that in the last episode, Bill, but welcome, Bill Kearney. Welcome.
Hey, John, good to be with you. Hope you're doing well.
Absolutely. We're getting close to the holiday season. I don't know if you're prepared for all of that yet, but my wife says that we are getting pretty close to being prepared and ready to go. So hope the same for you and everyone else out there. So today, episode 40, we're going to talk about kind of preparing yourself for the coming year. So, this is going to be a part one episode, and it's going to be a two-part total episode that we do on this topic, which is, preparing yourself for the coming year. So for 2026, building your 2026 retirement roadmap is what we're going to talk about today, Bill. And I know that the first two sections that we're going to cover today are basically going to be the income plan. And then we're also going to talk about taxes, basically the tax plan and some strategies and planning things you need to be considering in order to set yourself up for the most efficient and effective retirement income plan for the coming year. So why don't we kick it off and start with part one of today's part one and talk about the income plan. And, basically what we're talking about here, Bill, is where does the paycheck come from? And I know you have some ideas you're going to kind of start off with and talk through. So I'm going to turn it over to you, let you go.
Yeah, John, this is, it's kind of the basis for any type of retirement planning really is the income plan. And what we have found essentially is that retirement plans don't fail because the investments fail or because of poor investing. They oftentimes are on a path to fail because the income is mismanaged. And what we mean by that is, well, if you're working for a company or you're working for yourself or whatever the case may be, and you have a regular stream of income coming in while you're working, you get used to that paycheck coming in every week, every couple of weeks, every month, whatever the frequency is. Well, when you decide that it's time to make a change and move towards retirement, it doesn't mean that you don't still need a paycheck. It just changes where the paycheck comes from. And so all these years that you've been working and accumulating, what you've been doing is stockpiling funds to then use to create a paycheck for retirement. And so to do that, you really have to start at the baseline here and kind of do an inventory of the sources of income that you have. And we oftentimes like to divide those sources up into what we would call guaranteed sources of income, or maybe regular sources of income that you can count on. Those types of things might be Social Security, it might be a pension, things like that. Things that you know on a regular basis you're going to be receiving. And then we might also consider things like, non-guaranteed sources, variable sources of income. This is where your investment portfolio plays into account here. And that includes your investments. As you get older, it will include your required minimum distributions from pre-tax accounts, maybe sprinkling in some Roth income, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the tax section. So that's kind of the sourcing of where the income is going to come from, the inventory. Once we know what those percentages look like of what sources are going to come from guaranteed areas and what income is going to come from the variable area, that's when we usually can figure out, well, how comfortable are you with the percentages? And what I mean by that part is, let's say that you look at your guaranteed sources and it's only going to meet about 50% of what you need monthly to cover your expenses. You might look at that and say, I'm not comfortable taking the other 50% from my investments. That feels like a big drain on what I'm doing. In that instance, that's where we might come in and say, okay, well, where are some options? What options do we have out there to create other, what we would consider guaranteed sources of income, lifetime streams of income? And that's where things like annuities can come into play. Sometimes life insurance can come into play in those areas. So the income source inventory is kind of the framework, the foundation work for any type of income plan that we work on. John, anything you want to add in that particular area?
Yeah, and I would say that all good points you made there. And it also, from a timing standpoint and sequencing standpoint, I mean, talk about, Bill, what about our clients that retire early? And when I say early, what I mean by that is before they reach full retirement age as per Social Security Administration, and they haven't, they're not old enough to take their full benefit yet, for example, or maybe they're not even old enough to take their decreased benefit at age 62. We have clients, and I'm sure we'll have future clients that retire prior to age 60 or prior to age 62. They retire early for whatever reason. They've accumulated enough assets, or that was their goal to retire early. So there's a lot of things that go into the timing and sequencing of these different income streams. So when do we turn each income source on? Bridging that income gap between retirement and Social Security, like I just mentioned. It also plays into when you are able to start taking or elect to start receiving Medicare. So a lot of these things will come into play here from a timing and sequencing standpoint. Also, what about, let's talk through kind of the RMD situation. We have a lot of clients that do not want to receive their required distribution. They would prefer not to take it, but they have to because of IRS rules and guidelines. So all of these things, will play into the, your income structure, your income strategy when you get into retirement, whether you retire early or not. All of these things we have to think about and look at and talk through and be very efficient and effective in how we implement this into the strategy. But no, I think that everything you've said so far is very important to consider, because it's all going to play. It all kind of rolls downhill, right? It all rolls downhill into what the total income strategy is going to look at the end of the day. And if you get any of these pieces wrong, or if the timing is incorrect, or if the sequencing is incorrect, it can wreak havoc on your total income plan.
Yeah, I agree. And here's another thing to think about. We talked a little bit about, pension income, these guaranteed sources of income. I know one thing that we're seeing a lot of out there are companies that you may have worked for in the past where you have a pension that's due to be paid out. We're seeing that a lot of these companies are coming to the former employee or the employee and saying, hey, would you like to take a lump sum distribution? And there's always a question there about, well, I don't know. Should I take the lump sum? Should I take the income that I'm going to receive? I've got several different options on how that income is going to be structured. I can have it paid just to me. I can have it paid joint life, and my spouse can receive some after I pass away. But then I've got this lump sum. Well, what do I do, right? And so there's a whole analysis that can go on there, right, John? We do that a lot in the sense where somebody says, hey, I could get a lump sum payout. If I did that, what are my options? So there's that piece of it. A lot of companies are trying to get these pensions off of their books. They are weighty liabilities to them, and so they'd like to get them off their books. And sometimes you can get a pretty good deal on a lump sum payout from that. So that's something to think about with that. But you're right. When do we turn certain income sources on? When should we elect Social Security? Right, and that could be a difficult question in and of itself. And there used to be a lot more options with Social Security income where you could do, file and suspend, right? Where the breadwinner could file and suspend taking their payment, and their spouse could begin receiving Social Security off of the spousal benefit. And you could play that all the way out to age 70 if you wanted to. And that was taken away probably close to 10 years ago now. I think one of the big things that we look at, and that you might want to look at in considering your income planning with this is, well, if I take Social Security, for example, at age 62, versus my full benefit age of 67, how does that impact the rest of my assets? Because if I wait 5 years to take the income, I'm going to have to take it from somewhere else. Where am I going to pull that from? And what does that do over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years to my spendable assets? What we would call your retirement assets, we would categorize those as your spendable assets. What do those balances look like in those two different scenarios when they play out? A lot of times that can help you on the timing part of when I should take Social Security and factors like that. And then the other part of it is all of that does factor into the RMDs. Your Roth conversion strategy factors into how much you're going to be required to take from pre-tax accounts. John, we're getting into like a million different data points that are all playing together here.
Yes.
It's actually making my head hurt starting to think about this.
Well, I mean, it causes us to go into so many different directions with the analysis that we have to do for clients. I mean, to your point, if you've got to bridge that income gap from somewhere. So whether you delay taking Social Security, if you decide to retire before full retirement age and you make a decision to delay taking the Social Security income at full retirement age, or even maybe you decide to wait to age 70 so you can get your max benefit, that income gap has to be bridged. And it's got to come from somewhere. And if you're taking it from traditional IRAs, you've got taxes to consider at that point. Because we talk about this all the time. A lot of our clients sometimes feel that they're going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. That may not be the case depending on where your income sources are coming from. So, all of these different things have to be looked at. And the biggest partner that our clients have with their qualified retirement plans, whether it's from a 401k plan, which was moved into an IRA possibly, or still at a 401k, all of these sources that are in pre-tax dollars, their biggest partner that they have is the IRS. And we have to factor that in when it comes to bridging gaps when we're waiting to take guaranteed income sources. So that alone is a big data point that we have to consider when coming up with an income plan, that if we don't get that right, if we don't get the timing right, the sequencing right of where we're pulling these dollars from, which buckets we're pulling them from, it can make a huge impact on your longevity of your plan, right?
And let's talk about sustainability here too, right? We haven't even talked about inflation, how inflation plays into this. Like, you've got to plan for rising income because you also have to plan for rising expenses because inflation erodes our purchasing power. So you have
100%.
to plan that the income I need on day one in retirement is not the same number I'm likely going to need 5 years and 10 years from now.
100%.
So there's that. And then there's the stress testing on your investments in down markets. Let me tell you what my personal preference is, at least where I like to start in thinking about that. If I can come up with a way to create a situation so that you have 100% of your expense needs met by guaranteed sources, I feel like that's a really good starting place. And then all the other money that's left over in the variable bucket, right? The investment variable bucket is kind of the gravy. You can go use that and we can plan and spend that differently because all of our expenses have been met over here on the guaranteed side. Now, that doesn't work for everybody. Some people don't like that option, but I think it's at least a good starting point, and then we can work off of that to determine how do you feel about that scenario, right? And that kind of gives you the flexibility that you're looking for in planning. And again, the other part of this is not all people have the ability to plan it that way. They may not have the assets needed to create 100%, but it's a good starting point for a conversation piece.
Well, absolutely. I think anybody would love to be able to say or have their plan show them that 100% of their needs and their expenses are covered from fixed or guaranteed income sources. I mean, that would be ideal for anyone. But there's a lot more that goes into that to get to that point. And so to your point, a lot of folks don't want to go that direction because of the implications that it brings to the table with respect to their overall savings and retirement plans that they have. Because you could lose a lot of flexibility with your assets at that point. At the end of the day, though, I believe you came up with one of my favorite lines that I've heard you come up with before, Bill, and that is, your retirement income should be engineered, and I love that. should be engineered, not improvised. So I'll say that again. Retirement income should be engineered, not improvised. And that's what we're getting at here, folks, is that if you haven't come up with an actual plan for how and where you're going to take your income from during retirement, then you're just flying by the seat of your pants at this point. And a lot of mistakes can happen. A lot of missed opportunities can happen with respect to how and where you're pulling these funds from. And we've seen it too many times. You lose a lot of efficiency from many different angles when you do it that way. And so I think that all your points are very valid here, Bill. Again, from taxes to inflation to possible down markets, and I say possible because we never know when a bear market is going to hit and how long it's going to last. But we know that they are, somewhat frequent over time, and being flexible in your strategy is key. So all those points, very valid.
I definitely know that income should be engineered and not improvised. We might have to improvise on this podcast. And here's why. I think there's a lot more to talk about on the income, and I'd like to continue going there because the next topic is taxes. And that's probably going to be like, a 79-minute podcast, I think, to deal with topics, taxes. I don't think it would be that long, no. But I was just thinking too, what would really make this a lot easier on the income planning part of this is if we knew how long we were going to live. I mean, John, do you know when you're going to die?
No, but I do know that two things in life are certain. And I know that's where you're headed with this, and that's death and taxes. We're not going to live forever, but we don't know when that day is going to come. And I think at the end of the day, I'm going to just kind of predict where your mind is moving with this is that if, we have to plan for a lengthy retirement because
exactly
we don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know when that day is going to come. But if we do not plan for a lengthy retirement, then we are planning to fail. And our strategy is not going to probably not going to work out in our favor.
It's called longevity risk, right?
Correct.
It's the risk that you outlive your assets. And in fact, I don't have the study memorized, but I know Allianz Life did a study some years ago, and I would guess that if they redid this study, the numbers would be very similar. But by a 2-to-1 margin, retirees feared outliving their assets more than they feared dying.
Mm-hmm.
And my takeaway from that is, well, if you die, it solves the problem of running out of money, right?
100%.
But it's not really a solution that we look at in retirement planning. But oftentimes, if we show somebody, hey, this is what your assets are going to look like out at age 100, they just laugh and say, I'm not going to care at age 100, or I'm not going to be here at age 100. And my reply always is, do you know that? I mean, do you really know that? Because we don't know that for sure. And so why do we plan that way? Why do we have to think that way? Why do we have to change our mindset? Well, it's impossible to really achieve the highest level of peace of mind in the planning process if we don't take care of longevity planning. I can't look at you and say, look, based on the trajectory of this plan at age 100, not only you're going to have X dollars left over, but that balance is increasing year over year because of the way your income plan is structured right now. I don't know how you're going to achieve peace of mind. And then I have to ask, what are we even doing here?
Yeah.
Right.
But Bill, and I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but Bill, what about the client that says, but hey, Bill, John, I want to be able to do certain things and not worry about trying to save all my money to get me to age 100, right? I don't want to live like a pauper or not be able to travel or do certain things for my kids and grandkids, while I'm still here. Because if things play out the way that it possibly could, and I don't live to age 100, or I don't even live to age 85, and I'm gone, and I have all this money saved up in this, in all these accounts that I never took advantage of using and going on trips and traveling and having experiences and doing things for my kids and grandkids, then what's the whole point?
Exactly. I just had a meeting last week with some folks. I was doing a review, and we had this conversation, and it was the best part of the review meeting because everything else had been taken care of. All of the distributions that needed to be done before the end of the year, everything was done. And we sat back in the chair and I said, guys, at age 100, you're going to have $3.5 million left. They said the same thing. I don't care. It's funny. I'm not going to be here. And I said, but here's what we get to do with that number. I want to work backwards now, and I want you guys to go home and start thinking about all the things that you want to do between the ages of 65 and 80, because 65 is their retirement date, right? And I showed them, I said, look, let's plug in, for example, a $2,000 a month window for travel from age 65 to age 80. And guess what? Their retirement assets went from 3.5 million down to 3.2 million. I said, guys, we just put $24,000 a year into your vacation bucket, and it barely made a dent in this overall thing. What are the things that you guys have been talking about for 25 years that you want to go do, that you want to go see? And let's plan for those things, and let's front end the income planning part of this so that you can do those things. It's not about having the giant number at age 100. Maybe for some people it is. I don't want to categorize everything. But for most people, that's not what it is. They want to know, what can I do in retirement? And I got to front load that, because what I'm going to want to do at age 70 is not what I'm going to be able to do when I'm age 90.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying, Bill, is for all of the clients that we work with on the planning side of things, in coming up with the income plan, we are able to come up with various different scenarios where we can show them the impact on their overall plan from a total assets at age 100 or age 85 or age 90, whatever age they decide they want us to come up with for them. We can show them the impact of being able to do the things they want to do while they're here, and take away the stress of not knowing when the day comes that they're no longer going to be on this earth, right? So we can basically help them come up with a plan of action of everything they wish and hope that they can do during their retirement years, and show them how that will impact their plan over time without having to worry about the actual longevity risk piece of it. Because that's what planning does. It takes that into consideration. And
I'll just add this to that, John. You said that great. Very eloquent. I'll add this to it. If you are working with somebody that you trust and you have a financial plan and these things are not being done, you need to go to that person and have them help you create this part of your plan.
Agreed.
This is what it needs to look like. These are the things I want to accomplish. Can we start mapping that out so I can see what the impact of that looks like? Guess what? That gets to be pretty exciting. That gets to be fun. That's when this is not a monotonous task and it gets to be fun, because we're talking about your life with you and your spouse together, the things that you want to do. That's fun, right? So the income part of this does not have to be a scary piece. It is a bit detailed. There is a lot that goes into it. It needs to be taken step by step, but it doesn't need to be something that's scary thought to try to plan out. It actually can be a whole lot of fun when we do it. Now, we're about out of time here, John. I'm going to let you take us out here in just a minute, but I thought what we should do is just give a quick overview of the other 3 points, because we didn't get to point number 2 today. So the other 3 points, subsequent podcasts that we're going to do. And I'll just start off by saying that, yeah, next time we really do want to dive into the tax part of planning. Frankly, that could be 2 or 3 podcasts on its own, but we're going to keep it as, we're going to keep it as high level as we can from that point and give you some strategies on Roth conversions, which are near and dear to our heart. We really should talk about those more. Charitable planning, RMD, tax bonds, all that kind of stuff. The third episode beyond that will be the investment plan, right? How does your money work while you are sleeping is a great way to kind of title that part of it. We'll talk about purpose-based investing and tax-aware investing and income replacement readiness and all that kind of stuff. So we'll do that in episode 3. And then episode 4, I think we really wanted to talk about protection in healthcare, because especially folks who are retiring a little bit before Medicare age, there's a lot that goes into planning for what your healthcare picture will look like. Long-term care planning, right? All those things that people just love to spend time talking about, but they are necessary to talk about, right? We'll talk about why long-term care planning is really asset protection. It's really asset insurance as opposed to health insurance. So, John, that's kind of the 5,000-foot view on where we want to go from here. Do you think we covered everything we need to from an income standpoint today?
Well, I mean, obviously we kept it very high level, but I'm sure there's a lot deeper dive we could have taken in several of those topics we discussed today. And what I will tell you is, if you have questions on any of this stuff, please reach out to us. You can give us a call at 704-469-0200. or shoot us an email at info@crownadvisorgroup.com. And as always, you can feel free to go to our website at crownadvisorgroup.com and click on that button to schedule some time to speak with us if you'd like to. So please do so if you have questions or want to know more. And as always, please hit that like or subscribe button and pass this on to a friend, family member, or a colleague if you felt like it was good information. So we appreciate you coming out and watching us today. We'll see you on the next episode, and we look forward to it. Thanks, Bill.